And we're going live in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here we are live for our May episode of the Buyer First Ask Me Anything. I'm your host, Carole Mahoney. Welcome to my soapbox. We have a couple of great questions that have already been sent in to us. But if you're here and you're watching us live or even listening later on, post your questions in the comments or in the chat ping that you see below. If we aren't able to get it into this episode, we will definitely get it into the next one. And if you're following me on LinkedIn, you'll probably see me take a crack at it because I just love answering questions. Questions are probably my favorite thing to do. So if this is your first time to the Buyer First Ask Me Anything, you might be wondering, what is this Buyer First stuff all about? And why is this Carole's soapbox? In short, I can tell you about the data. There's LinkedIn's Buyer First survey data that shows that sellers, 67% of them say they're buyer first, but only 23% of their buyers agree. If you dig further into that survey data, you'll find the stat that talks about the fact that buyers, the number one trait that they value in sellers is actively listening. But it's the last thing that managers who are hiring are looking for in their sellers. Something needs to change here. I'm on a personal mission to change our perception of sales. And I believe that the way that we're going to do that is by making it all about the buyers and not just lip service, but in our intentions, in our mindsets, and how we train and develop our sellers. And as business owners, it's really what we know and breathe every day. We know that it has to be all about our customers. We're intimately talking to them every single day. So that's what Buyer First is all about. Oh yeah, and also, if you've been following me on LinkedIn, you know I'm coming out with a book on it next year. I'm pregnant with a book baby. Not actually pregnant. I've actually had some people wonder if I'm really pregnant. No, it's with a book, which feels like it though. So without too much further ado, if you're typing in your questions, we're going to get to those. But one of the first questions that we've gotten lately, we actually had this sent in to us. Somebody asked, what are the most important skills for us to have in order to be a buyer first seller? If I can only list one entire skill is the most important thing. It's the ability to collaborate. My mom and Napoleon would say, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. Well, sorry, Mom, but you're wrong. It's because of I think it's a 2011 study that was done by Harvard Business School, where they found subjects who were willing to pay 63% more for products that they had assembled themselves, which was far more than they were willing to pay for stuff that had already been put together for them. They saw this as being just as valuable, if not more, than what an expert would do for them. So in addition to placing more value on products that they put together, the researchers also found that people also were willing to pay more for products that were put together by their peers than it was by experts, people like them. Researchers called this the IKEA effect. Yes, after the Swedish manufacturer that requires products be put together. Now, this is just one of several cognitive biases that cause us to have a link between what we perceive as effort and what we think of as valuable. The more effort we put into something, the more value we place on it. So when we collaborate with our buyers in designing our offerings or our products or solutions, they're more willing to buy it and more likely to pay for it because they felt they had a say in developing it. Now, I learned this the hard way. It was, I think, shortly after I had started Unbound Growth, a mentor convinced me that we would have to put together this virtual online training program, and we could enroll all kinds of people into it. I spent a lot of hours crunching numbers, putting things onto a spreadsheet just to see how many people could we actually put through a course and how much the price would charge for that. As the numbers in that Excel spreadsheet started to grow and add up, included more and more zeros in it, I got excited and the number rose with my excitement. We figured that with, I think it was a 12-week course, we would get 100 people to sign up for it. At $1,000 a piece, we'd be cashing in $100,000 a quarter. And of course, if people took the online course, then they'd want to do one-on-one coaching. And so for every 1% or 10 people that we converted, there's another $60,000 without having to do anything. It's all repeatable business online. We're going to be sipping pina coladas by the beach and still making money. This sent me to a ton of activity. I did nothing else than share cold calls with everyone, put a blast to every one of my lists, posted it endlessly on social media. And when I wasn't blasting it out to everybody with a Pulse or a Twitter account, I was locked in my office with my PowerPoint putting together slides that were going to make us rich. After 8 weeks of constant promotion, PowerPoint edits, and lots of frustration, I was ready for the students to come coming in and start cashing in. You know how many people signed up? One. I couldn't believe that only after all of this work and effort, one person signed up. It was a complete waste of time and resources. I didn't understand, how do people get their courses that they advertise and make all of this money on? I didn't know what we had done wrong, which meant I didn't know how to make it better. So I gave up. I wish I could learn this lesson the first time that it happened, but it didn't. I spent a lot of time and effort trying to create products or services and offerings that people would want, only to realize that they didn't want it. I don't know why I was surprised that they didn't want to come to the party I had put together for them when I never even asked what they were interested in. So Napoleon and my mom were wrong. Doing something yourself isn't the right way to do it. The right way to do it is to actually collaborate. So I took those lessons, and what I did was build a experiment to find out how to build the 6-week virtual pilot course. I actually used Danny Inney's Course Builders Lab to do this. And I was so surprised by how just tweaking the process to actually find out and collaborate with people, what would they want in a course? What works for them? What doesn't work for them? What have they tried? What did they like? What did they not like? What are the goals that they're having? All of these types of collaborative questions to design something. What ended up happening is I thought I would just run this course as a test to see if it was going to work. But I learned a whole bunch of things. Like, my students wanted to create a community, a place where they could safely share their own challenges and experiences outside of the walls of their workspaces and Slack channels. Selling is a full-time profession, so knowing that other people struggle like you is a help. I didn't know that before. I also didn't expect things like the most basic steps like goal setting would be so transformative for the students after getting their feedback. And then I was encouraged because all of the students wanted to keep learning and wanted to sit in on future classes. They even went so far as to recommend it to other students who signed up because they had helped put it together. Not only did I do this course one time, I took that feedback and create an online demand course. What ended up happening is that for the next 18 months, I ran that pilot course, and it eventually got the attention of a company that wanted me to do it for their whole team. I haven't had time to put it online yet because everybody keeps signing up for it. All because I collaborated with a group of students that put more value on it, that told their peers about it, and those people put more value on it as well. Now, what do you think would happen if we took this approach to your new and current products and services? There's a way to do that. First, there's a number of attributes that I measure for and look for as far as how to test, measure, and coach and train for. It starts with mindsets, it goes into attitudes and beliefs that I know are necessary for you to be an authentic buyer first seller and collaborate with them. So here's the top 3 things of what it takes to be a buyer first seller. First, we have to get our need for approval under control. To seek it is practically hardwired into our brains. When we were in our early years of development as humans, that's how we survived. If you were left out of the group, that meant you were probably going to die. When we were children and we did something new, we looked to our parents for approval that we were doing the right things. It's wired into us to seek approval from others, to get that validation. But it gets in our way when we're trying to sell. It gets in our way of asking tough questions. It gets in our way when we want to have people see us in a certain way, because when we're not able to ask the tough questions, we tell people what they want to hear. Who trusts that person? When we're not exactly aligned with our own values because we're seeking the approval of others, we don't come off as authentic and transparent. It shouldn't be a surprise that 60% of sellers, according to data from Objective Management Group, struggle with the need for approval. The reality is that when we struggle with that need for approval, we're not going to ask the tough questions. We're not going to be trusted and trustworthy to our buyers. And the other thing of it is that managing your need for approval, when you let other people tell you or dictate or influence how you spend your time or how you make your decisions or even what your opinions are, you lose awareness of what's important to you, what drives you, what makes you happy. So you do things that don't align with your values, that creates a cognitive dissonance, and things don't come off well. Now, the other thing that happens is managing our emotions. This is the other mindset that's important for us to be buyer first. As far as the skill set goes, how to be collaborative. When we get wrapped up in our heads and we talk to ourselves, whether that's because the buyer asked us an unexpected question, or we're scrambling to come up with what we think is the right answer, or maybe our buyers expressed interest and we get excited that, oh, they're going to buy. We jump into talking about our offering. When that happens, and it likely will, it makes it nearly impossible for us to be in the present moment. We're somewhere else. You ever tried to have a conversation with a teenager while they're texting? That's kind of how your buyers feel when you're not in the present moment. 63% of sellers struggle to manage their emotions while selling with buyers, which, by the way, remember the Buyer First survey? Active listening is the number one thing that buyers want in sellers. If we're not managing our emotions in the moment as our buyer says they have a problem we can solve for, or that they're the decision maker, or that the solution that they just said they loved is now too expensive and they're going to shop our biggest competitor, we get excited, we get anxious, and we're in our heads, and we're trying to think about what to say, what to do, how do I get them to buy? We're out. We're out of the moment. We're out of the chance to hear what they're actually saying. And we're out of the opportunity to come up with the right question to ask so we can better understand why they said what they did. We're not present, we're not actively listening, and we're not asking the next question to understand more. Both of these mindsets impact the skill set that is so critical to be able to be buyer first, and that's the ability to listen and ask questions. We can't do that if we're in our heads. We can't do that if we're struggling to think of what to say so that they'll like us. All right. I know I went long on that soapbox answer, but it really is the most critical thing for us to understand. I think we have another question too that's come in. Let's see what we got for time here. We're good. All right. So our next question that I had come into us. Oh, here it is. What's the difference between consultative selling and buyer first selling? Okay. So imagine that you're going to the doctor. And they ask you a ton of questions, and then they write you a script and a prescription, and then they send you on your way. Do you feel heard? Are you bought into the solution that they just prescribed to you? And how likely are you to really follow their advice? Now imagine that you go to the doctor, and they ask you some questions, and you give your answers. Then they ask you some more questions based on your answers, and the doctor thinks and answers and says, well, let's do this, and let me understand a little bit more about that. Then the doctor asks you, so what do you think of this? How doable is this for you? What's your daily routine like? You know your body better than anyone else. How do you think that this is going to work for you? Together, you and your doctor come up with a plan. How likely are you to do what the doctor suggested? Because you came up with it, IKEA effect, you're probably going to be more likely to do it. This is the difference that I see between consultative selling and collaborative selling, or buyer first selling. I get it though, that for some, the intent of consultative selling, the way it was designed initially, was to always put the customer first. I get that. But the issue I see is in the execution of it, is that what's happening is that when sellers try to be consultative, it comes out like they have to tell and educate and prescribe because they're the reported experts. It all becomes all about them. Buyer first selling is different because it's going to require a mindset shift from telling to asking, from knowing to learning, and from looking at selling as something we do to others, dig into pain points, create urgency, overcome objections, just something we do with them, uncover challenges, discover compelling reasons, and understand the roadblocks. You see, the difference between consultative selling and collaborative selling, in my opinion, is that consultative selling, you as the seller or the consultant, the teacher, the prescriber of solutions. In collaborative selling and buyer first selling, you don't have to know it all, because let's just face it, you don't know it all. None of us do. And as soon as you think you do, you're going to be irrelevant. The other difference that I see in consultative selling is that once you reach the point that the buyer becomes a customer, most of us are done selling. It then moves on to an account or a project manager, a customer success team. And rather than this linear process, I see collaborative selling model as more layered and cyclical. Like an onion, you peel back the layers of an onion. I often describe the process kind of like driving to a destination in the fog, with your buyer kind of acting as your GPS and telling you which way to turn and when. If you take a wrong turn, your buyers can give you alternate routes to reroute you, but only if you're paying attention and actively listening. You see, the active selling never actually stops. We kind of know this intuitively, that this is how it should be, but it's not how it is. Because when we're collaborating with our buyers, the environment is always changing. I think actually it was it was John. John said this morning, oh gosh, what was it? He said that the buyer's needs are always going to be constantly changing. John Mateague said this. The buyer's needs are going to always be constantly changing and moving, and that we have to be able to document and understand what those changes and trends are so that we can evolve and change with them. I'm summarizing. That's what collaborative selling is all about. It's not about prescribing solutions because you think you know best. It's about moving in time with your buyer. This might sound a little daunting and complicated, but the reality is it's pretty simple. It's only 4 steps, actually, not to be confused with easy. The reality is that all you have to do is become a very good active listener and ask great questions. We've said that. The foundation for all of this, the 4 steps: shut up, stop talking, be fully present and listen, repeat what you heard, and then ask a question to better understand the detail of what you just heard. Those are the simple, easy, simple steps, not easy for everybody. Not when our brains reward us to talk about ourselves. There's a professor at University of College of London, Dr. Thomas, and I'm going to apologize now because I think I'm butchering the last name, Dr. Thomas Chamorro Premuzic. He wrote this book. I love the title of this book. It's called Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders? Don't you just love that title? And he writes about the crucial role that mindfulness actually has on our ability to actively listen. And it's so difficult, though, because society rewards us for being the loudest, the most self-promotional. He said in his recent article, I think on Forbes, that if you want to be a better listener, that the decades of research suggest that you have to work on 4 areas: focus, empathy, self-control, and inclusion. Look, the bottom line is that how, or even if we do something, is going to depend on our mindset towards the task. These are the internal factors that I just described that are the only ones that are actually in our control. So if we're going to change our results and evolve with our buyer and the times, we have to first change our mindset towards our buyers and customers and how we interact with them so that we can then change those interactions. Selling is about connecting. It's about communicating. It's about helping other people. So the better person you are, the better seller you're going to be. That's how I see the differences, I should say, between consultative selling and buyer first or collaborative selling. All right, let's see. I'm going to check in with Lou what questions that we might be having come on up here in the comments. Our next question. All right, we've got a few more minutes for this one. And actually, this is a question that's come up a lot lately. So the question is, how do I start a buyer first relationship when my current customers, if they've already gone through a traditional sales process? Is it too late? It's never too late. Now, this question actually came up a lot in coaching calls in the last couple of weeks after working with some clients who got their new install base or their current customers that they needed to find ways to expand accounts with. I personally believe that it's never too late to try to improve the experience that someone has with you. But if the first time your current customers hear from you is to when it's time for them to renew, or it's a limited time deal for them, or when you see an upsell opportunity, that's really not improving their experience. It's just reinforcing more of the same. You know that, right? Now, what you don't want to do is you also don't want to disrupt the status quo, because you are the status quo, which means that you want to reinforce that natural bias that we all have to stick with what we're already doing. Most of us just don't like change. But you have to understand how they got to where they are now. So if they've already purchased from you, a lot of, I think, sellers forget that this is your first experience with them and things have evolved and changed, and you need to find out what's evolved and changed for them. So ask them, when they first became a customer, what was it that made them become a customer? What made them decide yes? There was a reason they said yes. What was the reason? Ask them what the process is that they went through to internally make this decision, who was involved, and what their thoughts on the process were. Ask about who else was involved, but then also ask about what goals did those people have? What expectations did they have? How is the impact of that going to, how does that impact them? And then ask about even the implementation of it. What did they expect? How did it go? What did they learn from it? So a lot of times people find internal things that have happened because they've had to implement something. Ask them about the goals that they had and what made those goals so important. Ask them how they've progressed in those goals and what the impact that progression had on them. Ask them what they're working on now. What are the obstacles or roadblocks or challenges that they foresee? And what solutions are they considering for those? Don't talk about your solution yet. Don't talk about it. Shh, zip it. Why is that? Okay. So I actually came across some research from B2B Decision Labs on this. They had done a behavioral study that actually aligned with what research psychologist Christopher Anderson, he proposed in his study, The Psychology of Doing Nothing. We've all heard that your biggest competitor is the choice to do nothing, right? It's a real thing. He found that there were 4 status quo biases that people have when they want to put decisions off and that they want to stick with their current situation. They called them preference stability, perceived cost of change, anticipated regret and blame, and selection difficulty. So when you ask about how they got to where they are now and the process that they had to go through reminds them of the effort it took to get there. That reinforces their bias towards not wanting to change. You know, like when you stuck around with a bad boyfriend or girlfriend for too long, or an employee because you've invested so much work and effort into them, same idea. So when you ask about things like their goals then and now and the progress that it had, and you put some quantifiable numbers to that, that also then reminds them of the perceived cost of change. They've put so much work in, they're invested. It's now part of their bottom line. Asking them questions about implementation, what they learned. That's another way to uncover what they call anticipated regret or blame, which they'd have to go through again if they wanted to switch to something. But it also helps you get feedback on what you could improve in your implementation team. And yes, finally, talking about future goals and perceived challenges of those goals and to reach those is another way to uncover ways you can help. But rather than talk about all about what you do and no one else does, which isn't actually true, admit it. You're not actually all different that much. They could definitely explore other options and implement it, but why go through all of that when you already have the ability to do that with what you already have? That's reminding them of the effort and work that they had to go to get a solution put in. Why would you go through that if you've already got the tools at your disposal? In short, you can make the buying experience different for anyone. You just have to make it all about them first. All right, so let's check in. I want to check in with Lou in our comments, see what questions that people may be having, if anything. All right. Lou says, pay attention, no attention to that man in Italy. All right, well, everyone, I think that's all the questions that we have so far to today. We have just a couple of minutes more, so I'm going to just hang out here. I wanted to thank everyone, too, also for all of the comments and everything that you made on the LinkedIn post about the book baby that's coming. Again, I'm not actually pregnant anyone. I had at least 3 or 4 people email me, congratulating me, asking if I needed like crackers and Sprite or something. No, it's a book baby. buyerfirst, How to Sell the Way People Buy, is signed with Page 2 Publishing. We're going to be going to print and we're going to be launching next fall. I'm planning a big launch party in Boston during Inbound. It's going to be a great time. I am so excited for the world to, well, they're going to hear a lot of my personal stories in it. And I've got so many exciting other stories from clients and customers and research and data. It's a lot, but I'm so excited to share it with everyone. And my real hope is that this is going to change how people think about selling. As business owners, we've tried everything, but we don't realize that the thing that gets in our way in being successful in sales is actually our own mindsets. I mean, think about it. We've tried all of the methodologies. We've tried all of the tactics. Why aren't we seeing the results? It's because of what's happening between our own ears. And like anything, you can change your mind so you can change your results. All right. Also, make sure you sign up for our newsletter where we release some little bits that are coming through in the book, but also any new research that we've come up with. We always share that in our newsletters first to our subscribers before anyone else in the world hears it. You know, sometimes I'm going to comment on things that are happening in our current environments. I've been known to get a little political. No worries there, though. Everybody, thank you so much for joining me. And as always, keep learning, keep sharing out there. And we'll see you next time, June 21st. We're going to be coming back here. Send us your questions, post them in the chats. I want to know what's on your minds when you think about shifting your mindset to be all about your buyers. Until next time, everybody. Bye.